Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Daniel, I'm a 2D illustrator, and today we're going to jump into Lens Island, and I'm going to show you the different types of assets that I created when I was working on the game. This is of course a follow-up to my previous video about how I started working on Lens Island, so I thought it'd be fun kind of showing you some gameplay and what I did. So I'll be honest, this is my second time actually recording this video. I recorded it last night, did like an hour of recording, and then realized that none of the audio was working, so we're back here again. But it's fine, we'll jump straight into it. And then I'm also going to show you later on some of the actual asset files themselves and a couple of unused concepts that we had for Lens Island, so if you're interested for that, do stick around. Anyway, we will begin. Going to be a bit more of an impromptu video, there's no script or anything like that. And we will start playing the game, so let's just go do this. Hello. And I'm also going to show the intro cutscene. Let's just go standard. And we have Bob, so we're gonna choose Bob. Okay. So this here is, okay, so this is the intro cutscene for the game, and this was something that was added pretty late on in production, just because we felt that there needed to be more of a hook for players to really sink their teeth into, or something to connect with before they started playing the game. So all of this sort of stuff here was concepted by Julian first. He had very, very rough scribbles. And together we decided to add a little bit more abstraction and texture, tell the story about what's going on in Lens Island. So most of the motivation behind this was to have the art feel like it was haphazardly drawn, you know, and told to people throughout the time. It's like, you know, ancient history and that sort of thing. For the faces and things like that, I decided to abstract the characters a little bit to focus more on the actual objective of the story or the focal points. And I think, yeah, just having the blank faces like that fits a little bit more in game too. For this one in particular, I remember I concepted this in 3D in Blender, and just to get the top-down perspective that you normally see when you're in the dungeons, so kind of alluding to that as well. This one here, I thought it turned out okay. We wanted kind of to show the greed that was twisting humanity, and so we just decided to have like an evil looking shadow. This one here I would say is my favorite out of all of the cutscene art that I did, and I really like just the energy and the dynamic feature of the Voyling jumping out. You'll see that I've abstracted all the brush strokes around to sort of point towards that focal point too. And then the final one, which is more of them just taking over the world. Lots of fire and things like that. Definitely quite a bit more painterly and abstract than what we see in-game, which is actually very graphic and hard-edged, but overall super fun to do, and I think it definitely adds that bit of story to get you hooked. Okay. I might turn down the music in just a second as well. But yeah, this entire cutscene here too between you and Lucky Jack, also something that was added pretty late, and again just helps you contextualize what we're doing before we start playing the game, because in previous builds you would start just on the island itself and you were free to do anything. So I think this definitely helps to bring in new players. And here's the splash art again. Big 2.0. I did make a video on this one specifically, so if you'd like to check out how I did that, I'm going to link it right here, but I will talk about it in just a second. Okay, and now we are in Lens Island. I'm going to turn down just the audio just a little bit of the music. Okay, so here's the game. And so it's really cool seeing everything come together. As I mentioned in my previous video, I worked on this game on and off since 2020, and the game just got released in the 1.0 very recently, which is exciting. So in terms of icons, let me show you the first things that I did, and they were these icons over here. So these are all the different resource icons that you have in the game. You've got produce, resources, cooking, and animal resources too. But the ones that I did were actually the very first icon I did for Lens Island was this one over here, which is the wood one. And this was kind of to determine the rest of the aesthetic of what the other icons would look like. When I was making this wood icon, I decided to start with this one because Julian asked me to redesign a whole bunch of the farming ones. But the wood one for me was important to nail because it's a survival and crafting game, so wood is most likely going to be the most common resources that players will see. So I really wanted to nail that before I moved on to everything else. And my general philosophy when creating the icons was, the first thing was I wanted all of them to fit the same orientation. So I moved all of them 45 degrees, as you can see, just so they kind of have a similar feel. But apart from that, I also wanted there to be a graphic imperfection to everything. You'll notice that a lot of the silhouettes here have little divots, little chunks missing, taken out of them, just to give them a little bit more character and help them feeling not quite so dull. We've also got fibers, for instance, here. So for most of these two, I'd really tried to limit the amount of colors that I used and the amount of blending. So clay is a good example. You can see that on the spherical shape, it sort of bands down into multiple layers and into multiple different colors. So I, as mentioned, avoided blending just to keep everything graphic and low poly. And the reason for that was because in the actual game itself, a lot of the resources are low poly. So I just thought it would add a little bit of character, but do something that the game doesn't really do, and that's just a little bit extra detail. So for example, the stone icon over here, you'll see that there's little chips, little, divots, a bit of texture in it that you don't necessarily see on the actual icon in-game. So a lot of these different icons here were done throughout the course of production, and most of them so I did most of the icons, but there's a few here that I didn't, which, for example, is the mushroom. I don't think I didn't do the cooked venison or the fish fillets or things like that. But it was cool because as production expanded and more artists were able to work on the game, they used what I did style-wise and tried to match, the design philosophies, which I think they did a very, very good job. So it's kind of having, again, that graphic imperfection, limiting the colors, trying to think about the overall saturation. And as I mentioned too, the main and most important part of the icons for players is to be able to identify them as quickly as possible. So thinking really about the tonal shifts, the major color blocks, and just the silhouette were most of the things that I was focusing on too. Apart from that, let me show you some of the character icons that I did. I'm gonna go chat to Jared here, who, fun fact, was also the first character icon that I designed. And there he is. So with these character icons, again, they were gonna fit the same graphic style that I had set up, but there was a few different changes that I wanted to do from the actual models. In game, you can see that a lot of the characters here don't have faces. It's just like the eyebrows and the hair and very basic modeled nose and lips and stuff like that. But in the actual icons, I could give them a bit more personality just to show what they actually look like. And that bridges the gap of you, the player, and what you expect from these people when you interact with them. So Jared the blacksmith. We've also got Steph over here, which is, fun fact, Julian's wife, who also worked on Lens Island. And it was kind of cool to put her in the game and have her features be present as well. So most of them too have, you'll see, have really strong rim lights, and that helps to separate it from the background, especially if I just orient the icon right over here, over this dark door. You'll see it really stands and really pops out. And then we also have Alex over here. I don't remember who I based Alex off of, but most of these character icons, I had references of either actors or other characters that I was trying to pay homages to. Or as I mentioned, real people, like with Steph. And then over here, Kevin. I believe Kevin was based off of Julian's dad. I don't actually remember. But he also kind of has a bit of a John Butler / Travis Fimmel sort of look here. Just a regular fisherman. And I'll show you in detail later on about the actual icons of what they look like and the nuances between them. So let's continue. One of the other icons I did too was especially the cursors themselves. So you'll see that this cursor that we've got in the game was sort of meant to be like an arrowhead or something sort of along those lines. So fitting within the theme of exploration, but still having a little bit of edge to it as well. But the cool thing is when you hover over certain items, like the tree, you'll see that the icon turns into an axe. And if I hover over a stone, then you'll see that turns into a pickaxe. So this was super cool because it's something that you don't really think about as you're playing the game, But for somebody like me, this is something that I have to actually design and put some thought into. But we wanted it to feel nice and readable, and these were quite fun to design. Okay, let's have a look. I think if you go into the building icon as well, you know, small things like these trees and rotational arrows and things like that. Not very sexy stuff, but still things that it's quite important for the game. Okay, so let's get out of building. And I'm going to jump in here. And for all of the loading screens, I did as well. So this is one that goes into the dungeon. And I think this is honestly one of my favorites. I really like the lighting setup that we've got over here. Okay, so we'll move around. Because most of my work that I did on Lens Island was 2D focused, I didn't do any of the 3D things, but I did concept a couple of things here and there. And just sort of testing out different ideas with the team. But I really love the graphic style and how low poly everything feels. Just that kind of top-down feeling as well, which is really nice. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to build a quick house, and then I will talk to you in detail and show you the actual assets that I have for the game. Alright, so let's cut down some trees. It's so satisfying every time you hit that, and in Lens Island there's a mechanic where if you click at the right time, once that circle pops up, you get extra damage for whatever you're doing. So it's more about timing as well, which is super fun. But it's really cool, you know, being on the project for as long as I have, seeing all of the small all of the small changes and implementations, and especially with things like community feedback, really help to push the game to be the best that it can be, which is really awesome. The team for Flow Studio was super tiny, like barely more than 5 to 6 people at a time, if that. So it's really nice to see the culmination of all of that hard work as well. Okay, we'll grab some blueberries. Get some clay to make a roof. There we are. Okay. I don't know where to build my house, but I always like the idea of building near water. Okay, get some more blueberries here. Okay, I reckon, you know what? This little lake is nice. We could probably build a house like here-ish. Or maybe if we clear some of these... I don't know. Maybe we'll do it here. We'll do it here. So... for some trivia too, for each icon, if you ask me how long each icon took to make, it's generally, as you start any project and you're getting used to the brief and, you know, sort of what the visual look can be for the game, it obviously will take a little bit longer, but as you start moving into it, that time slows more and more down as you get better with your processes. I would probably say each icon on average took me about 40 minutes to an hour to make from start to finish. So that includes sketching, drawing, coloring, and things like that. And I wouldn't do too many iterations if they were quite straightforward. So for instance, if it's like limestone or stone or clay, something that was already in the game when I started working on it, I could just refer to the 3D models and do it that way. Some of the other icons we developed in tandem with the resource itself. So I think the slime one was one, for instance, where we had the icon around the same time as the 3D models. And so we had to develop the look in conjunction as it was being made. So that one took a little bit longer, but generally I didn't do too many iterations of these. Most of the time, if, you know, Julian liked what he saw in the sketch, we would just take that to render and do it that way. For things like the mushroom stew and the fish ramen, you can see I've just copied and pasted the bowl and changed the contents within. So there's a whole bunch of different techniques you can do to save time when you're working on projects like this as well. Okay, so now it's getting close to night. Oh, I need some stone to build a foundation. Where is stone? Forgot how to zoom in this game. Oh wait, no, there we go. Never mind. All right. Okay, we get some more blueberries. I mean, we probably want to eat something because we are going to die otherwise. Okay, sweet. Pretty good. Now we can go back to our little spot that we had and put together a small house. Cool. Alright, so I feel like maybe I want kind of like a patio area that goes out to, you know, the pond over here. So put it there. Maybe something like that. You can do, I don't know. Can we have a balcony here at all? Oh, I think we can, but oh wait, no, we can. There's a wooden balcony, so maybe balcony can be like here? Oh, I don't know why that counted as building a house when I have a balcony. But anyway, so we'll put the door here. Kind of a weird shape, but yeah, we'll do it that way. Window. Another window. And then we're just gonna wall this up a little bit. There we are. And we need glass for this. We can replace that later, but we'll just do this here for now. And another door. Huh. I don't know about you, but I always suck with roofs in games. Now, you know what? We're just gonna double it. Just do something like this for now. And we'll plonk the bed, I reckon, kind of be cozy. Like right here. Damn it. There we are. Put one right there. Couple of plants inside. Nice and cozy. Okay, and now let's take a look at the actual art assets that I had for Lens Island in more detail. Okay, so the actual assets themselves are all saved on my computer over here, and I will show you a bunch of them. So I don't think this is every single icon that I did, but it's a good selection of them. And we're going to start with the ones right at the top here. So these are all the Steam achievement icons that we had, and I remember when we were designing these, the main philosophy that we wanted was for players to feel like they'd actually earned something, and that had to be reflected in the design. So the idea was to have these be like little collectibles, you know, little badges or things like that, where you can actually be proud of something that you've done in game and have that tangible feeling as you had more achievements. So the way that I designed it was having this kind of wood paneling here with this silver metal iron on the outside. But the actual shapes would change depending on what the achievement was. A lot of the circles were just very standard, do this, get this kind of thing. But you'll notice that we have a hexagonal one here for enemies. We've got a special shield one for collecting all of the weapons. And we also have like a nice shield trophy sort of thing. Like a golden shield here with like a reef for defeating the main void boss. And then also this one over here with Len sipping Mai Tais and drinking on the beach. I don't remember what that one was for, but I just remember that it was a fun kind of spin on what we had done as well for the different icons. Smaller technical things that we had too was just adding in a little bit of an outline around the icons just to make them pop. Because once again, icons, and the main thing with icon design is to have them be as legible as possible, as readable as possible. So here are the different resource icons that I had mentioned while we were playing the game. Here are the cursors that are more in depth. So, you know, the axe one, pointing one, pencil, the actual cursor itself, some of the paint ones too, and that sort of thing. Then we also have all of the characters that I'd mentioned. And so I had talked about, so the way that I'd rendered, for instance, all of their noses were exactly the same way. And so for this character over here named Bug Lady, I don't think we actually ended up naming her. I might be wrong. But the way that I did the eyes and the nose for all the characters was basically the same. So we've got kind of a stroke that goes down here that's just one piece, goes underneath where the nostrils are, and then it goes to the side and there's a bit of a highlight. And the way that the eyes were rendered was that the pupil and the actual eyelid and eyelashes themselves were all one shape. And then underneath it, there was like a triangle to show where the bottom eyelid was. And really focusing more on like the planes of the face and that sort of thing with minimal highlights just to get the illusion of light. So you'll notice that, you know, if I zoom in for Cowboy / Alex over here, it's the same thing. You can have a little bit of color for the eyes, but for the most part, it's the same design principles. I suppose the challenge was for all of these to make them feel coherent because, you know, when dealing with different likenesses, you want to still stay within that style, but also show the unique characteristics of each person. One thing too I want to mention about this Maya character icon that I've got is the mustache and beard was super inspired by Obi-Wan from the Clone Wars, because I'll post an image on screen right now. The way that the graphic nature of the way Obi-Wan's mustache sits over his top lip, that always stuck with me for some reason. And I really liked that you could see that there was a shadow casting underneath as well to really make it feel chunky. And so I kind of carried that design over into some of the different characters here. And especially with something more organic like hair, you can play slightly with gradients, but for the most part, again, it's still like 3 colors or 3 or 4 different colors just to communicate that. A lot of the shirts here as well, you see are very, very chunky. Like these are just straight up very polygonal. Same thing for Pirate Sleazy #2 that I've named. And then we've got Steph and some of the other ones too. So yeah, let's jump over into back what we've got. And all the bottom ones here were different character icons that you had. So these you would unlock as you played the game and you spec'd into different abilities, or if you had a weapon that could do certain different tasks and move sets. The main philosophy for all of these was to have the feeling of movement and motion going as much as possible. And it was kind of challenging because we only had, as you can see, like white, gray, and black, and a couple of slightly different gradients here and there. But for the most part, limiting yourself to those colors only and still trying to get the sense of movement and perspective was quite difficult. So what I ended up doing was I took a bunch of reference screenshots myself, doing some of these moves, or just, you know, in moving the camera just to get the sense of perspective or what it would look like, or even going into 3D and just mocking up something really quick just to get a sense of foreshortening, especially with wide angle lenses. And you'll bet so many different times when I was designing these icons, I was making the noises as I was doing it, like the sword, like, you know, that kind of thing, swinging this way, and I would kind of do the movement to get the sense of energy to try and transfer that over. So as long as it kind of gets the idea across of what's going on, so it could be like an upward swipe or sort of one that twirled, a berserker mode, for instance, or like, you know, using the bow and arrow to bash something. That was the main point here. Most of the time in game, you're not going to pay attention too much to them, but it should give you an idea of what you have. Okay, so moving on from the icons, we're going to look at some of the other loading screens that I did, starting with Bridgewater. This one over here, I think was like the 3rd or 4th loading screen that I did for Lens Island. And by this point, most of the visuals were established already. Like I'm talking about the actual aesthetics. The way that we did this one was we took a screenshot of Bridgewater in the game, and Bridgewater, if you don't know, is the main town where all of the NPCs are, but it changed multiple times during production. A lot of the NPCs that you see here, like just around the loading screen, ended up moving to different places in the game now. But for one stage, we had just, you know, the feeling of a town. So it was cool to, I don't think I have the actual 3D base of what I painted from, but I used that and just sort of quickly drew in the line sketch here to get the sense of proportion and perspective, and then tried out a couple of different color thumbnails just to see mainly the lighting and atmosphere that we wanted to go for. And then from there, you'll see that I slowly just built it up and then painted very, very, very slowly, bit by bit, and sort of different things at a time. For this over here, trying out a different version of lens, so different, you know, high level gear and things like that. We want to sell the idea of just progression in this image, basically. Like getting to the town, he might want to sell a bunch of different things to these NPCs. And then just a bit of color grading and some contrast tweaks, as you can see, changing some of the values a little bit. Like I realized that I kind of got the lighting wrong, or at least I wanted to push the feeling more of a sunset. So I changed up the values of this quite a bit. And that's that one. And so this is the final cave splash illustration here, and I actually really like this one still. I particularly like the mood and the atmosphere that it brings, and I'll show you quickly how I did that. So starting off again with a couple more thumbnails, because that image, unlike the Bridgewater one, didn't have a 3D base. It was just sort of drawn from scratch, and we wanted to get the feeling and the sense of what it's like exploring the caves for the first time. So just trying a couple of different things out, limiting my values very, very clearly, and just getting the sense of where we wanted to place Len in the actual image itself. So a lot of Dutch angles to show this feeling of unease and to get the sense of scale and perspective right as well. From there, I took them and started doing just really, really, really rough values. And just trying to figure out like where the light sources are basically. So we know we wanted Len to have a torch looking up and sort of lighting the immediate vicinity around them. And then in the far distance, it was just going to be like this alien glow, something that was completely different. And that's largely did that with color, which I'll show you right now. So in this one over here, you can see that we've got all of the warm tones here from sort of the man-made structures. So Len themselves, and then we have just a couple of bits of scaffolding up here. But then we have further in the distance that kind of alien glow from all of the lightstone, and that was meant to evoke a sense of mystery as well. So the process for that one is like this. Starting off with a rough sketch, changing the perspective a little bit, the camera angle, moving it a bit more, and then slowly starting to render and put everything together. Throwing in Len, I've got some perspective grids here and things like that. Realized that this perspective was wrong, so I had to change that. And then adding a little bit more color and changing some of the different bits and pieces of the scale. So it's kind of interesting because when I look back on my processes for this now, there's a lot of stuff I would do differently and a lot of things I would probably do a lot more efficiently. You can see for the most part, for all of the splash arts, I'm still trying to get a sense of what I'm painting I'm still trying to get a sense of what I'm painting as I'm painting it. Now I'm much more diligent about locking all of the design elements in before spending a lot of hours rendering, because that's the thing that simultaneously takes the most amount of time and is really fun to do, but should really come at the end of the process once you figured everything else out. Okay, so this one here is probably my favorite thing that I had done for the game, or at least definitely, in the top two. Just because I remember when I was painting this, the process was so easy and so simple, like everything kind of just fell together. And there wasn't a lot of frustration or headaches painting this one. So this here was to show, okay, so you've gone into the dungeons, and now this is like the next evolution of that. We wanted a lot more action. We wanted a lot more of like oh my god, like what is this giant creature over here, to really kind of push that idea across. And so the initial thumbnails for this were very loose again, very, very simple, but trying to figure out what we wanted to communicate and the perspective. So same kind of things. So this one here is more of like, Len's in charge here. Len's about to do this giant slam down with the hammer and electrocute all of these different enemies, and the void bore far in the distance. This one over here, a lot more dynamic, slamming down and having like a nice curve that leads over to the focal point, which is really the creature's mouth, and Len sort of as a secondary focal point with the glowing hammer. This one over here, more about running towards it and the feeling of being overwhelmed. And I think this one over here was just a slight tweak, so I changed the read from left to right, but also gave Len more of like a hunched pose, like ready to go, to feel a bit more competent and like they were able to handle everything, and then just still trying to figure out where all of the different enemies were. So from then I had this color thumbnail that I had. This was super quick and just to communicate the rough idea and the sense of scale. And you can see that to get a sense of the void bore's volumes and forms, I've just kind of drawn it in perspective just to kind of see where all the different shapes lie. And over here, the main idea for this thumbnail was I wanted kind of like a circular motion kind of going up and around here. So there's a flow of lines that sort of go down here all the way up to the hammer, up to the head. It goes up to the doorway and then like back up over here, and it has a circular feeling. So just sort of getting that 3-point perspective as well was quite important. And the overall painting process, so taking that color thumbnail, blowing it up a little bit in Photoshop, and then just very, very slowly going into paint and render things. You'll notice that, the first thing I painted was the void bore. Had to really nail that design, get all the reflections and, details in the mouth, and then slowly adding in all of the enemies as well. And then from here to here, pretty big color difference, color change, just to reinforce the focal points. Then just a bunch of cleanup. And then we've got this over here. So the ice update over here, this is one that I collabed on with another artist. So this one I can't really take that much credit for, but it was this fantastic artist named Izzy, which I'll link her Instagram on screen and in the description down below. So this one over here was, I was pretty busy with other projects. And we needed to outsource some of the art to somebody else so they could do a lot of the rendering before the update came out. And so I mainly acted as like sort of a consultant on this and would sort of clean up a couple of different things there. I'll give some feedback, but for the most part, Izzy did all of this work here. So definitely a fantastic artist and should check her out. The next big illustration that I did was this one over here, which was the multiplayer 2.0 splash. And just to kind of announce that we do have multiplayer in Lens Island now, and here's the different classes that you can kind of play as. So this one here, if I'm being honest, was a pain to do. Like, it was so difficult to get this from start to finish, and there's a few different reasons why for that. But I wanted to show you the final illustration of what it ended up looking like and sort of the process of how it evolved over there. So the initial thumbnails were something like this. We've got the farmer, the adventurer, and the warrior, just different classes that you can play in the game. And then again, just communicating a little bit of that combat. So we have Len standing over here, more of an archery sort of position, different characters, and the red bounds were the 16:9 crop as well, because the artwork was going to be designed to be in 4K. And then when you were playing the game, you know, it would be cropped to 16:9, so something sort of like this. But we tried different locations out, different poses, a couple of different feels. And I think this one over here ended up being the one that that took the cake to really push it to the next step. I think the issue was with this one here, if I'm being honest, this is like the next iteration of that thumbnail. There was still a lot of different things that weren't figured out and weren't designed yet. And so it was really difficult to start painting when I hadn't answered my own question. So it's something that I've definitely learned now and changed in my future projects. But you can see how rough everything is. We've got, yes, a general sense of where all the characters are and a general sense of the lighting, but there's no other information there. Like, this house is just a giant blob, but there's no sense of scale or perspective. A lot of things are still missing, and so it definitely needed like at least a few more hours of iteration before rendering, because if you have to make major changes in this illustration, which I did, that costs you like, you know, almost like a day of work at times, depending on the changes that needed to be done. So it was definitely a project that I realized like, oh, I have to evolve and I have to change my process. So let's jump in. We've got the sketch here, and you can see like this sketch is super rough. You know, like, I'm not a character designer by any means, but I definitely should have spent more time fixing this guy's pose up instead of jumping into color and start rendering straight away. But I think I was just a little bit impatient and wanted to, you know, kind of have that immediately. So if I move forward a little bit, you'll see that the background's going to change quite a bit. I'm starting to paint more of the houses and things like that. Major change of here, so changing up the poses, some vignetting, some haze to make the characters pop. Starting to paint more, another major change here, adding in more storm clouds. So again, deviating from my initial thumbnail, but we try to figure out how to add more drama to this piece. Skipping forward even more, adding in the boat, you know, changing some of the character poses, rendering Len up, changing that pose again. Zooming in a little bit more. And then from here to here, major change. Major change. But you'll see that we've got the characters much clearer over here than having all of the farmland in the back. So even removing like all of the, you know, the boat and the, I don't know why I can't think right now, the windmill. But it definitely helps the composition. And from here to here, just changing up things a little bit, making the grass a little bit nicer, but adding in the boat in the background. And then from here to here, another major change, changing Len's hair, which is not that big, but moving all of the voids down below. So you can see that there was just kind of, we settled on it in the end, and, you know, it turned out being okay. But I think because of the amount of changes we had to make, it was really frustrating, if I'm not going to lie, to go from like spending all of this time rendering all of these houses to then having to get rid of it. So I think, as I mentioned, moving forward, the main thing is to really nail down that thumbnail before you start committing, because if not, you just lose hours and hours of work at a time. But that brings me to the next one, which is the final, and that is the Lens Island 1.0 illustration. So this one here, too, like the one with Izzy, was a collab, and this was also done with a fantastic artist named Gabriel, which I'm going to link his socials down below. But for this one, he basically got the image to this stage over here, and he's a lot more 3D than I did. a lot better at 3D as well. But I loved and was so impressed by the overall composition and the feeling that this image evoked. You know, so we've got the 3 characters standing up here. We've got the Voidlings, but we have just more of that expansion of the Lens Island world. And most importantly, for the actual Steam crop, you know, having it small like this, you can clearly read the title and you've got a little bit of the characters, but it was kind of like maximized for all of these different things, which was really awesome. So at this stage, there were some scheduling things and Gabriel wasn't able to work on this illustration anymore. So I came in to kind of polish everything up a little bit and kind of paint it a little bit more and add a couple of extra details just around the image. But this here is like 95% done. And as an illustrator, like the fun part is all of that little rendering stuff, you know, adding a little bit of tree texture here, a little bit of grass here, a little bit of an extra color or an extra shadow. Those are all the fun things. But structurally, the image is quite nailed down. So I'll show you what I did. So again, this is Gabriel's work over here, and then this is what I did. You can't really tell, like there's not much of a difference apart from maybe a boat here, which didn't end up being in the final, like we removed this. But it's really, really small things, you know? So it's like adding a little bit more detail to this tree, and the background trees as well. Like you can see that if I zoom back into this one, the tree here is quite rough, especially as the one in the foreground. And then I just kind of cleaned it up and added like a cave here, a little bit of a chimney smoke, kind of polishing everything up and making sure everything feels nice and coherent. And a tiny, tiny bit of color grading as well. And just even small things like making the foreground grass feel a little bit more stylized as well. So it was awesome to chat to Gabriel and see his process as well. And, you know, the way that he was able to implement 3D is so flexible and so necessary in this kind of line of work when there's a lot of things changing all the time. If you stick with painting right away, very early, as I mentioned, you can get locked into a process quickly, but you need to be flexible, and that's what 3D allows. So super, super awesome. I love how this turned out in the end. Oh, and a major change. Getting rid of the shoes on Len, because Len is not meant to have shoes. So that was quite fun to do as well. Okay, and so the last thing that we're going to take a look at is some unused concepts. So this is the first that you're going to be seeing it, and these were the maps for Lens Island. So in the actual game right now, and what it ended up being in final is when you open the map in Lens Island, it's kind of based off of the actual map in Unity, and it's feeding that information back to the player. So, you know, that means that in the future, if there's any map changes or any additions, you know, it's very easy just to add on to that sort of, that system that was already working. But before we did that, we tried to experiment with having a actual hand-drawn map that players could see. So for instance, I'll show you just really quickly here. The way that it was concepted was this island here, I believe was the Kickstarter island that was given as a reward for people that backed the game. But it was like a small tutorial sort of section that was built. And so I traced this sort of based off of an off-the-graphic view of a screenshot in game, and tried to fill it out and make it feel more, you know, like in the actual world itself. So very torn, very kind of haphazard. And you'll see that we've tried different styles as well, making this feel a little bit more graphic, a little bit more cartoony and comic-y, so I suppose. But then to have like a location for instance, where the player was, and I don't remember what the X was, maybe like different waypoints you can put on the map as well. So let me show you what we did. So for instance, this one over here, this was called the Forgotten Island. So this was like the main island that you start off with. And I think in game, this is where Bridgewater is now. And this is where I just built the house that we saw earlier. But this is for all intents and purposes what we used. So if I go into Forgotten Island, I'll show you that I ended up tracing over the actual contours of everything themselves. And started filling everything in with all of the resources. And yes, the resources are actually where they are in game. So all of the different trees where they're placed wasn't random. I referred to the actual top-down shot of the game and placed them accurately. So the way to do that was I just basically drew out in a little asset folder all of the different lineup of all the trees and all the rocks and things like that, and slowly filled them and copied and pasted them around. So now you can see we've got all of the resource icons, starting to put in some basic color and rendering, a little bit more shading, and I think this is where we got up to. So a lot of detail, that ultimately never ended up being using. But the cool thing is you just got to try this stuff out and see if it works, right? So some of the structures that were already here were drawn, the pirate shack, one of the cave entrances and things like that as well. And you'll see if I go back and forth between my map and the actual screenshot, it's basically 1-to-1 because it has to be accurate. Yeah, never ended up being used, but once again, you know, kind of fun to explore and see different ways of interacting with the game world. I will also show you the cave map. So here is the top-down version of the cave. Let me just go back over here. And this is my map for the actual cave entrance. So if you want to check and look at what the cave looks like on one of the main cave systems, feel free, go ahead. But don't spoil it for yourself as well. But you can see there's a lot of extra details that we've got in the cave one. Specifically where all of the different houses were, some of the tendrils for where enemy spawns would be, but also I don't think I placed the resource icons in this cave, just because it was still meant to be a little bit mysterious. And then I think this is where the Void Boar boss battle happens as well. And yeah, you can see this is sort of based off of the actual in-game screenshot as well. And the last map that we'll take a look at is Bridgewater. So Bridgewater changed quite a bit during production. It was set in different maps and then different places, and eventually ended up getting split among the final ones for what all of the NPCs were. But this is what it looked like at one point in time. You'll see here too, so this little section here, this is where we took the screenshot of the Bridgewater loading screen, which I'm going to chuck on screen now, which is kind of fun to see. And again, using all of the assets that I created with all of the trees, and just drawing in all of the different houses for all the NPCs too. But this was what the screenshot looked like. This video is getting kind of long, so I'm going to wrap it up now, but thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions at all, please leave it down in the comments below and I'll get back to you. By the way, if you'd like to pre-order a little Wyatt plushie, which is my OC that helps me analyze art of games and film on this channel, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below. Pre-orders are going to close on September 12th, so if we don't hit the target of 50, then everybody gets refunded. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope this was helpful, and until next time, take care and stay safe.